Level 0. At this level, the ground doesn't want to kill you. It just wants to mildly inconvenience your morning. These are the baby sinkholes. Surface-level depressions, barely deep enough to twist an ankle or swallow a traffic cone. No fatalities, no dramatic footage, and barely a mention in the local news unless someone's car gets towed for parking too close. They're often caused by old utility lines, loose fill, or water slowly eroding man-made soil. Urban areas where poor drainage and heavy rainfall create just enough instability for the surface to cave in like a soggy sponge. In 2013, in South Chicago, a man was casually walking down the sidewalk when a 3-foot-wide sinkhole opened beneath him. He dropped in up to his hips and was later pulled out, bruised but alive. His shoes didn't make it. It was the geological equivalent of slipping on a banana peel. In other cases, the collapse is so minor it doesn't even break the surface. You might see a dip in your lawn. Maybe your mailbox leans a little more each week. The danger is low, but the message is clear. Something underneath is shifting, and it's almost never shifting in your favor. Cosmetic collapses are like whispers before a scream. You can fix the pavement, you can ignore the cracks, but the ground remembers. Water doesn't stop moving, and soft earth doesn't forget where it was weakest. Because the next time it gives way, it won't be under a sidewalk. It'll be under a car. Level 1. Now the sinkhole has teeth. Level 1 collapses are where things stop being funny. These are the holes that don't just inconvenience traffic, they erase it. A Level 1 sinkhole is large enough to consume a full-sized vehicle, often without warning. 1 second, a sedan is parked at a red light. The next, it is 20 feet lower than it should be, swallowed by a void the Earth didn't feel the need to announce in advance. In 2010, Milwaukee got a taste of this. After a torrential storm, a sinkhole opened beneath an intersection and dragged an SUV into a 20-foot deep chasm. The asphalt peeled back like paper. The car vanished. Witnesses said it looked like the ground had been punched out from below. The driver survived, but only because she was pulled out before the pavement shifted again. The vehicle was later recovered, crushed and twisted beyond recognition. These sinkholes form when water, usually from broken sewer lines or flash floods, erodes limestone or unconsolidated fill beneath roads and parking lots. Over time, the void grows until the roof collapses. Sometimes it happens during storms. Sometimes it happens on a perfectly sunny day. The damage is serious. Streets are cordoned off, infrastructure gets ripped open, gas lines, water mains, fiber optics, all snapped in a single breath, and you never see it coming. To the human eye, the road looks fine. It always looks fine, until it isn't. Because if the ground can swallow a car this easily, what happens when the thing sitting on top of it is a house? Level 2. At Level 2, the ground isn't just opening up beneath streets. It's coming for the buildings. These sinkholes are large enough and deep enough to collapse entire structures. Homes, businesses, even small apartment blocks can disappear in minutes. Unlike earlier levels, there is no time to react. No warning crack. No groaning foundation. Just silence. Then collapse. The most infamous case? Seffner, Florida, 2013. A man was asleep in his bedroom when the floor simply dropped out beneath him. A sinkhole had formed under the house and opened directly below his bed. He screamed once. His brother ran in and saw only the edge of a black pit where the room had been. Rescue crews couldn't reach him. The hole was unstable, expanding with every hour. His body was never recovered. These sinkholes are common in karst terrain, where limestone dissolves over centuries from underground water flow. Florida, much of the southeastern U.S., parts of China, and Central America are riddled with these fragile layers. You could be living over one and never know it until gravity cashes the check. After a Level 2 event, the ground rarely settles. Engineers declare the area unsafe. Adjacent buildings are often condemned. Sometimes the sinkhole keeps growing. Sometimes it stays quiet, like it is waiting for something heavier. These are no longer isolated freak incidents. They are multi-ton reminders that human architecture means nothing to a collapsing Earth. Because if a single bedroom can vanish in seconds, how much of a city block could go next? Level 3. At Level 3, the sinkhole doesn't stop at one unlucky house. It takes everything around it: the sidewalk, the asphalt, the water mains, the power lines, sometimes the entire street. Block-level sinkholes can span over 100 feet wide, collapsing large portions of urban infrastructure like a folding stage set. You don't just lose a building, you lose the ground the neighborhood was built on. In 2020, Naples, Italy, woke up to the aftermath of a crater that had opened in the parking lot of a hospital. Over 100 feet wide and 60 feet deep, it swallowed multiple cars, destroyed part of the facility's power systems, and left the area looking like it had been shelled. The hospital's emergency generators barely kept operations going. No fatalities, but only because it happened at dawn. Had it opened during the daytime, The casualty list would have been written in real time. These events are usually triggered by sudden saturation of underground soil, either from broken infrastructure or extreme rainfall. Cavities form silently beneath the surface until they reach a critical point. Then the ground collapses like a pulled trapdoor. Everything above it drops with no time to escape. There is no dramatic warning, no visual clue. To anyone passing by, the pavement looks solid. Then it drops 30 feet. Cleanup takes weeks, recovery takes years. And the psychological damage of watching the earth turn inside out beneath your city block? That lingers. But sometimes the ground doesn't just fall. Sometimes it explodes upward and brings something much worse with it. Level 4. Level 4 sinkholes do not just open, they erupt. At this point, the collapse isn't only vertical. It becomes violent, fast, and sometimes loud. This level marks the transition from passive subsidence to active ground failure, where sudden shifts in underground pressure send mud, gas, water, or even entire layers of earth spewing upward. You don't just fall in. The ground throws debris back out like it wants to finish the job. In Diceta, Texas, 2008, residents witnessed something surreal. A small sinkhole began forming near a salt dome used for oil storage. Within hours, it expanded into a gaping, 900-foot-wide pit. Entire vehicles were swallowed. Oil tanks tipped over and disappeared. Trees slid sideways into the void like chess pieces being removed from the board. The earth bubbled and spat as liquefied clay rose to the surface. No one died, but only because the land gave just enough warning to evacuate. Eruptive sinkholes often form near salt domes, abandoned mines, or pressurized aquifers. They are triggered by years of human tampering with subsurface geology, pumping, drilling, draining, storing. The land holds on until it doesn't. Then it gives way all at once, like a lung exhaling centuries of pressure. The explosion is not always literal, but the force is real. Roads ripple, soil boils, foundations tilt, and people run without waiting to ask questions. This is no longer erosion. This is release. The kind that makes you wonder what else is down there, building tension in the dark. Because if the ground can rise and collapse in the same breath, what happens when people are still standing on top of it? Level 5. At level 5, sinkholes stop being structural disasters and start becoming mass casualty events. These are the moments where lives are lost, not one at a time, but in groups. Entire families, entire workforces. The kind of collapse where rescue becomes recovery, and sometimes not even that. In Guatemala City, 2010, a violent tropical storm swept through the region, dumping heavy rain on an already overburdened and crumbling sewer system. Then came the sound. Not thunder, not an explosion. Just the sudden roar of air rushing into absence. A perfectly circular sinkhole, 60 feet wide and nearly 300 feet deep, opened in the middle of an intersection. It swallowed a 3-story building, a clothing factory, a security guard post, and at least 15 people, gone without a trace. No bodies were recovered. The shape of the hole was so eerily symmetrical, people thought it had been drilled. What caused it? Not a natural cave, not even a karst formation. Just years of leaky pipes and poor city planning hollowing out the earth beneath a densely packed neighborhood. One storm, one tipping point, and the void claimed its due. These kinds of collapses can be triggered by earthquakes, flooding, or even just time. What they all have in common is that they strike places where people are living, working, or sleeping. They hit without sirens, without countdowns, without warnings. By the time you realize it is happening, the building is already gone. But what happens when the sinkhole doesn't stop? When it keeps growing, long after the news crews have packed up and left? Level 6. Level 6 sinkholes are not satisfied with a single collapse. These are not quick disasters, they are ongoing threats. Slow, unstoppable, and hungry. Unlike earlier levels, these sinkholes do not settle. They grow. Over days, weeks, or even years, they consume more land, more structures, and more certainty. Sometimes they start small. A crack, a dip in the ground. Then they widen like a wound that refuses to close. One of the most infamous examples is the Berezniki sinkhole in Russia. It began in 1986, triggered by water flooding a potash mine deep below the surface. At first, it was just a minor collapse. Then the ground started pulling in roads, buildings, even a rail line critical to Russia's economy. Decades later, it is still growing. Over 1,000 feet long and 650 feet wide, the crater now threatens nearby factories and residential zones. Locals call it the pit. Scientists call it unstable. The government has quietly built a new railway to bypass it. These expanding sinkholes form when the supporting layers of earth or rock are continually eroded by groundwater, especially in places where mining, drilling, or over-extraction of water has already weakened the geology. The ground collapses, more water floods in, and the cycle repeats. Like a rotting tooth, it spreads from the inside. At this level, the danger is not just what falls in, it is what might fall in next. Entire towns have been forced to evacuate. Entire landscapes have changed. You do not fix a level 6 sinkhole. You adapt to it, or you leave. Because when the land decides to reshape itself in real time, you are no longer in control of where the surface ends. Level 7. Most sinkholes are terrifying because they appear in places we think are safe. Roads, cities, bedrooms. But at level 7, we step into a different category entirely. These are not man-made disasters. These are natural megastructures, vast enough to hold skyscrapers, old forests, or entire weather systems. The largest confirmed sinkhole on Earth is Xiaozhai Tiankeng in China's Chongqing region. Locals call it Heavenly Pit. It is over 2,100 feet deep and nearly 2,000 feet wide, large enough to fit the Empire State Building with room to spare. Inside, there is a waterfall that disappears into underground rivers, cliffs lined with cave systems, and a unique rainforest growing in the pit's shadow. Scientists discovered species there that exist nowhere else on the planet. These monster sinkholes form over millions of years in karst landscapes, where underground rivers slowly eat away at limestone until the ceiling collapses. When it finally gives out, the result is not a hole. It is a world. So far, most of these megastructures exist in remote areas, but they are not exclusive to untouched wilderness. In regions like Papua New Guinea, Mexico, and southern China, similar voids are being discovered beneath populated areas. Some are hidden under thin rock layers, undetectable without ground-penetrating radar, and not all of them are stable. Level 7 sinkholes may seem majestic, but they are also sleeping giants. Geological features this massive do not just form and stop. They evolve, they shift, they collapse again. And if one of these ever opens beneath a populated region, the difference between a natural wonder and a mass grave may come down to which day it decides to fall. Level 8. At level 8, a sinkhole is no longer just a hole in the ground. It is a chain reaction, a terrain-wide failure, the kind of collapse that reshapes maps and leaves permanent scars on satellite images. These are catastrophic collapse zones, where the Earth gives way across hundreds of meters, sometimes triggered by a single weakness that spreads like a fracture through glass. What makes them terrifying is their unpredictability. One landslide, one flood, one moment of pressure on a delicate underground system, and entire regions begin to move. In Alta, Norway, 2020, a stretch of coastal land suddenly collapsed into the sea. Not just a crack or a sinkhole, but 8 homes, a road, and part of the coastline itself. The ground had been built on quick clay, a type of unstable soil that behaves like a solid until disturbed. When it fails, it liquefies. Buildings do not crumble. They glide sideways into oblivion. Elsewhere, thawing permafrost in Siberia has started to mimic similar behavior. Giant craters have opened in the tundra as once frozen Earth releases gas, shifts layers, and collapses in unpredictable ways. Scientists are racing to understand how many of these voids exist and whether more are forming beneath remote towns. At this scale, a sinkhole is not a single event. It is a moving system, a destabilized zone where any step could be the one that triggers the next collapse. And no one can stop it. You do not fill it, you do not build over it, you leave. Because what do you do when the land beneath your feet is not just unstable? It is actively deteriorating on a geological scale. Level 9. This is where the ground stops collapsing randomly and starts collapsing by design. Not intentionally, but inevitably. Level 9 is not one sinkhole, it is a network. A system-wide failure unfolding beneath our cities, powered by aging infrastructure, weakening geology, climate stress, and time. This is not theory, it is already happening in slow motion. In Mexico City, over 20 million people live above a sinking lake bed. Water extraction has drained the aquifer beneath the metropolis for decades, causing entire districts to subside several inches per year. Buildings lean, pavement cracks, and voids form beneath the surface, waiting to collapse. In Tampa, Florida, the land sits on limestone riddled with cavities. As population grows and water usage rises, the risks multiply. The city has seen homes vanish overnight, roads buckle, and lawns drop into cavernous pits with no warning. Then there are the unexplainable moments. In 2021, during a pool party in Israel, a sinkhole opened beneath a private swimming pool. The water vanished in seconds. A guest was pulled in and killed. The void was over 40 feet deep, hidden beneath a luxury home. No one saw it coming. At level 9, sinkholes become part of the landscape. Not isolated events, but symptoms of larger decay. And the terrifying part? Many of these underground weaknesses remain invisible until the exact moment they collapse. You cannot predict them all. You cannot prevent every failure. So here's the final question. If the ground can vanish beneath your feet without a sound, how sure are you that anything we build is really permanent?